So it's a bit like having a bucket that's got holes in it, and the education system fills it up, plenty of teaching, pumps water into the bucket. But if there's holes there, it's a waste of time. So until the education systems embrace the whole idea that we need to understand the neurology of learning and resolve that issue first, find out why a child has got a glass ceiling there to his or her learning, and doesn't matter how hard they try, they're not getting through the glass ceiling. Well, if you've got that, that's a neurological issue.
Hello, Awaken Beauties. Finally, it's here. The truth to empower women to true inner beauty through a healthy mind and inner biology. I am your hostess, Cassandra Keogh, a 20-year salon owner, organic beauty product formulator, positive mind management, and clinical hypnotherapist. And I am here to help you stay sane, get sleep, and bring your sexy back. Sponsored by evokebeauty.com. evokebeauty.com. Now, let's get to it. All right, ladies, if you're looking for healthy hair, beautiful skin, and a calm, quiet, clean, collected, powerful mind with superior CBD, go to evokebeauty.com. That's evokebeauty.com. And you'll receive 25% off your very first order with the code AWAKEN. Again, that's evokebeauty.com. Use the code AWAKEN for 25% off your first order. All right, and welcome to the Awaken Beauty Podcast. I am Cassandra, your organic beauty, positive mind management, and clinical hypnotherapist. And I cannot tell you what an absolute pleasure, and I am truly honored to have our guest, Wynford Dore, on the Awaken Beauty Podcast today. Now, I witnessed hundreds of mothers in my salon chair, making it a part-time job to assure that their children have a path to have the most positive educational experience that will set them up for success. And unfortunately, that is not often the case for many women that sit in my chair. And it also leads to frustration in the home and anger with both the child and the parent. Now, I stand with Wynford, both being in the business of improving lives. And going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all human beings are built to have access to and the ability to grow their personal skill sets. Now, when we can freely apply our skills, we find joy, content, and satisfaction from being able to be of service to others. And the opposite is isolation, content, and lack of motivation. Now, the question really is this: how can every individual, especially starting as children, optimize the areas of the brain that connect the mind and the body, and for us to grow these skill sets? And so this episode applies to everyone, and also a great episode to share with someone you know or love that wants to up-level their brain and how they experience the world. So who is Wynford? Wynford is the founder and CEO of Zing Performance, a brain development program conducting breakthrough research to address the root cause of reading issues and other learning difficulties, and more. So far, his work has been featured on 60 Minutes and other major TV networks. It has also helped transform the skills of elite athletes, but it is the success in helping children discover their zone of genius that sets Wynford apart. So in his latest book, Stop Struggling in School, he fiercely attacks the use of labels to describing learning difficulties while preaching hope to increasing the number of totally misunderstood children and adults. Wynford, it is a great pleasure, and I want to welcome you to the Awaken Beauty Podcast. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Cassandra. The honor is mine. So I just love hearing about what you're doing, and I love how you describe your audience too. So let's have a great discussion.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, I have women in my chair on the half hour every day, and ages from 35 to 42, and even grandparents, and addressing the situation on many different levels. Why our brains are breaking down, and specifically in children, and why our school systems are breaking down with the overwhelm of all of these children that are being lost in the system. You have an incredible story, and it is so captivating. So I think to start off today's episode, I really want to drill home. First of all, you're a serial entrepreneur. I have absolute respect for everything that you've done in your life, but something changed for you when your daughter nearly took her life. So maybe you could just jump us off and help us understand your passion for what you've developed and what we're talking about today.
Well, yeah, I am an entrepreneur, and I'm used to tackling big problems and finding different solutions that no one else has thought of. And so I was at a point in my life when I was surrounded by all of the trappings of success, and everyone assumed I'd got this wonderful, happy life. I'd got the nicest cars and a plane at the airport and a boat and houses and all of that sort of stuff. Nobody knew that I'd actually got one child, one of my 4 children, my eldest daughter, really struggled at school. Great teachers, same as my other children, but just could not learn all she was being taught. And that was getting her down. She was trying hard. Everyone was trying hard. And then one day when she did attempt to take her life, it was just the most scary wake-up call. Here was I, a dad, making things happen in my career, but not solving the serious issue I'd got in my eldest daughter. And when I got the news, I was traveling to the hospital, rushing to the hospital. It was about 2 hours journey away where she was. And on that journey, I made the decision that should she live, I was going to give the rest of my days, the rest of my career over to finding out why for her learning was impossible, why she'd hit a glass ceiling in learning. There was no obvious reason, and I had to solve that problem. And so that took me on the most amazing journey, which I'm still on, meeting wonderful professors, wonderful academics, wonderful medical researchers, all of whom had got pieces of a jigsaw that hadn't been put together. Now, if you're a dad that's used to making things happen, you don't use the normal protocol. You have to have a solution, because the next phone call could be the one that you never wanted to have. So to me, it was, I took on huge numbers of researchers, all open-minded, conscious people who weren't held back by conventional thinking, and I put them together and I empowered them and I led them. And it wasn't long before we were realizing some of this research that came from Harvard, some that came from very close to you.
Mayo Clinic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, the former head of research at the Mayo Clinic is now on my advisory board, my scientific advisory board. So I've got wonderful connections with the Twin City area. But I was seeing all of these wonderful pieces of jigsaw, and when I started piecing them together, I saw hope for Susie. Mm-hmm. And by this time, hundreds of other parents were gathering around saying, we need this too. This problem is huge. 1 in 4 families at least have got one child that is underperforming at school. Some of them labeled with ADHD or autism or dyslexia. Some of them have never been formally diagnosed, but they're still underachieving. So I just developed a momentum then which keeps me going every day. Until I reach everyone, Cassandra, I have not done my job. But the thrill is along the way, I just get so much encouragement. Even this week, I've had wonderful encouragement from some of the folk that have been going to the Revolution Wellness Center. And within weeks, these children are changing in a dramatic way for the better, showing the potential that their mums often recognized, but the education system, not the teachers, the education system is not set up to find hidden potential. So that's what I'm all about.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point before we start today's discussion as well, is that, it's not to wrong the teachers. It truly is the system. I mean, if we really go back to the 1900s and how our school systems were set up, kind of coming out of war and whatnot, we wanted to put people to work. So we systemized the system to do tasks and not really look at the individual as a whole being and being able to really help them bloom in all areas of their creative and analytical mind. And so it really kind of set us up for doom and gloom. And thankfully, there's more resources coming to teachers today, and this is one of them. But unfortunately, what your program, Zing is its name, provides is a lot of what I've found is a lot of mothers will bring in reading specialists, or they'll bring in outside specialists to help them tutor. And it's a very long, drawn out process. While everybody has their specialty in the way they think and how to really help children with learning disabilities. But Zing, and credit to you, because bringing together masters of the mind on something that's so revolutionary and what scientists, I believe, probably think they have figured out is no easy task to do and to validate on the market and actually show the success. I mean, you took your money and you created a school. Is that correct?
I own a school. We've got 300 children in it, and they are all doing brilliantly. They're all exceeding expectations, and every child has got within him or her the ability to exceed expectations. But there's a big problem with the education system. I'm a fan of teachers, by the way, but the education system focuses on only 2 out of the 3 elements. They focus on good teaching. Yep, that's important. And in the developed world, teaching is extremely good these days. They focus on getting the children to practice, and that's another element that's necessary to hardwire into the brain what they've learned. But the third element, there is no resource for in the education system, and that's determining whether or not the brain can take in the information to learn in the first place. So children that struggle with reading, they can have the most amazing brain, but if they can't read, information isn't going in. Mm-hmm. For some of those, they also have a problem with this. They hear instinctively and instantly turned into thoughts they understand. So they're described as having attention deficit. Mm-hmm. So the 2 main ways in which children can learn are in about 25% of children impaired. Now, the education system isn't measuring that. So it's a bit like having a bucket that's got holes in it, and the education system fills it up, plenty of teaching, pumps water into the bucket. But if there's holes there, it's a waste of time. So until the education systems embrace the whole idea that we need to understand the neurology of learning and resolve that issue first, find out why a child has got a glass ceiling there to his or her learning, and doesn't matter how hard they try, they're not getting through the glass ceiling. Well, if you've got that, that's a neurological issue. Mm-hmm. And in the education system, we have a lot of psychologists, good people do good work. Mm-hmm. This is neurology. So what I've had to do, because I figured in my lifetime, Cassandra, I probably would not change the education system. Mm-hmm. So what I've tried to do is to create something that mums can do at home and clinics like Revolution Wellness can do there, that shows mums and dads and teachers what is the issue and what you can do about it. And when they see that, it's the most amazing aha moment, as you can imagine.
All right, ladies, if you're looking for healthy hair, beautiful skin, and a calm, quiet, clean, collected, powerful mind with superior CBD, go to evokebeauty.com. That's EVOQbeauty.com. And you'll receive 25% off your very first order with the code AWAKEN. Again, that's EVOQbeauty.com. Use the code AWAKEN for 25% off your first order. Yeah, I think it's so imperative, especially now with the numbers of, why we don't know. I mean, the same as where you're at across seas and here in Minnesota, whether it's glyphosates or stress in the womb or nutrition or what have you, really it doesn't matter because we're at a point, I believe, in society where we need these foundational measurements so that we can get the full schema, so that we can really look at a child independently and say, okay, how can we help this child where they're at? And if they can zoom through all of these different technical skills and they're on their way, great. But then at least we're able to catch the ones, like to your point, that are falling through the holes in the bigger system. So I think, to help us kind of dive into really understanding the neurology of what you've created and what you've discovered through your impeccable research. I always go back to Dr. Dan Siegel. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I'm constantly teaching about how the brain works and the gamma waves and the processing speed and the mind and how this all really goes into what you've developed. And so Dan Siegel, I'm not sure, are you familiar with his triune brain model?
Do you know, I am familiar with it. Have I studied it? No.
No, and it's okay. So I'll just basically frame it up because I am a visual person. And so he has the triune brain model. And I'll tell you why I'm going to show this in a second so you can kind of help us understand more, is that the reptilian brain, the mammal brain, and the human brain. So we have, the frontal cortex, and we've got the amygdala, and we have the brainstem. And so when children or adults, when we flip our lid, everything goes out and we're just, running from our lizard brain, really, to reptilian brain, right, to keep us safe. Now, there's a key point here, and you kind of equate it to how mitochondria runs the cell. Having a well-functioning cerebellum and vestibular system, which sits right at that stem and connects all of this, is what you found was so imperative on your tracking the eyes and all of this. Can you share a little bit more about why scientists and neurologists have missed this key point about the cerebellum?
Well,
I don't know.
The work started at Harvard Medical School. Professor Jeremy Schmarman, amazing guy. He spent years trying to tell the world the cerebellum is far more important than we've been talking about. People thought that the cerebellum was just coordinating balance and movement. And he was saying, no, it's coordinating just about everything that's happening in the brain. Mm-hmm. It's only 10% of the volume of the brain, but it's 3/4 of the brain cells. It's really important. And to me, I see it as the brain-body connection. It's the skill development center of the brain. If we want connections to control our emotions, to connect our memory functions, to give us social skills, to give us eye movement so we can read, or auditory processing, whatever skills it is that we need, it's the cerebellum that's instigated it. And it's also the quality control system. So if I'm not good at reading, if I'm not good at social skills, if I'm not good at sport, it's because the cerebellum has not been able to fulfill the quality control of skill development. So Schmarman was saying this for a long time, and for years he was ignored and he was poo-pooed. Conventional wisdom was not listening to him. Well, I heard about what he was saying whilst he was still being ridiculed by other neuroscientists. But to me, it was the only hope. And if you've got a daughter that doesn't want to live and someone gives you any glimmer of hope, boy, you chase that down. And that's what I've done. And then I found other research from around the world explaining so many other pieces of the jigsaw, how we can measure the development of the cerebellum, how we can drive the development of the cerebellum. And so what we were doing, we found that by stimulating the cerebellum in very similar ways to which young babies stimulate the cerebellum when they are developing. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
A proportion of those that struggle with reading bypassed some or all of the crawling phase. So a lot of what we're doing is replicating the vestibular stimulation that in turn develops the cerebellum and gives the brain more natural ability to create natural skills.
So the vestibular system, so is that really the system that creates balance and fluidity and fluency through all of the brain?
But there's a huge, huge number of connections between the balance organ and the brain. They're actually not sure whether it's giving timing or power. Okay. But you have to stimulate the vestibular for the cerebellum to be active. So, for instance, it explains why normal brain training games, which has no vestibular stimulation because you're just sitting by a computer, why they don't create the kind of lasting results people want them to.
Bingo.
No vestibular stimulation, no change in the cerebellum, no lasting change in the brain. So that to me was a big aha moment. And so that took us away from brain training per se. Everything we did had to involve vestibular stimulation. We talk a lot about plasticity.
Right.
Vestibular stimulation into the cerebellum enhances plasticity. And the lovely thing is it can do it at any age. So it readies the brain for learning new things. And of course, when we've hit a glass ceiling, that's what we want to break through that glass ceiling. We want to ready the brain to learn something new and blast me through that glass ceiling. So our program is all about exercise. It's all about stimulation, vestibular stimulation, balance stimulation, and then a coordination activity. Because what we want is increased density of gray matter, more brain cells in the key parts of the cerebellum doing this skill development role.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go too technical, but I don't want to frighten people because we're not actually doing anything other than what's completely natural.
Right. I think that's really, really key because, the question is going to be, there are all of these apps and there's all of these brain training systems that have been developed with the best of intentions. But the key differentiation here is that you're stimulating the vestibular to get to the cerebellum. And that's the missing link. Otherwise, you're just, I don't know how to put it any other way, but you're missing that missing link to get everything into coordination, really.
It is the master coordinator of everything. So I want to link back to what you were saying about your hypnotherapy knowledge and experience, because there is a very important link. What we do by stimulating the cerebellar vestibular system is increase the precision of skills. We do it for elite athletes. I don't focus on that, but we do it for elite athletes because they want to be world champion or they want to improve their hockey points or whatever it is. But, where my heart is, I want to help kids that are struggling with learning, their low self-esteem. I want to help them feel good about being in class and being able to learn. So we are giving them skills. And the specific skills we focus on are eye movement to make reading easier. Every child that I've ever come across that doesn't read easily, it's not because they haven't been taught. It's not because they aren't trying. It's because their eyes are jumping around. And if people go to the Revolution Center, they've got my equipment is in there now. They can see for themselves what's happening when you test your child. So that's a typical skill. Another skill is full of turned waves in comprehended thoughts. So that's another skill is listening. Social skills are skills, sporting skills are skills, speaking skills, confidence and shyness is to do with the development. So those are all skills, and we know we're very good. We're world class at creating better skills. But that's when the prefrontal cortex comes in, because when a skill is not fully developed, the prefrontal cortex gets full of stuff that shouldn't be there. It's having to process that skill that's not fully developed. And you're having to think about it hard, and it's very hard work. The problem then is if you fill up this precious space, your thinking brain, you're likely to go into emotional overload. So the frustration that comes alongside reading difficulties and ADHD and impulsivity and so on is all because the very control center for the brain, which is in this executive function part here in the prefrontal cortex, when that's full of processing skills because they're not fully developed, you get impulsivity, you get poor attention, you get loss of emotional control, you get poor organization, you get poor memory. So one of many surprising results we had in our research, Cassandra, was when we improved these fundamental skills, people had more mental capacity. They were calmer. They were less impulsive. They were more organized. Now, we can't take credit for that because we weren't trying to achieve that. No, I just mentioned that because it links back to the training you have about the amygdala.
I think that's really, really important because I think going back to the neurology of everything, it's really important that as children, we're certainly not taught about our brain and how our brain works. And I talk a lot about positive mind management.
Yeah.
And, I recorded a quick mini episode last night about the importance of the future of our children based on programming. And negative programming can be up-leveled with positive programming. This is really what we're talking about with what you're doing. And between the ages of 2, the brain is in that theta state, and 2 to 6 goes into the beta state, and 6 to 12 we get into the tween state, where all of these synapses and the frequency of our brain should be being optimized. But to your glass ceiling comment, it's really unfortunate at a very young age, people hit that glass ceiling and then they just find their way in the world some way, somehow. Now it touches me because I was a child and I don't like labels, and I never allow any of my clients to label themselves. If they come in for ADHD, we just say, we're going to learn how to optimize your brain better so that you can, to your point, free up the thinking mind, and where all the overwhelm is going on in the conscious and subconscious, that they can't become present to actually process material.
Yeah.
And so, when I was a child, I remember fighting with my mother at the kitchen table. Absolutely to the T of what I opened today's session with. And I remember my brother being labeled with ADHD, being thrown in, and this was true. And you would just be thrown out into the hall, be told that you can't learn or you're stupid and you're disrupting the class. And we talk about kind of the key things, the shyness, frustration, emotional loss of control. These are all signs that, especially just back in the 70s and 80s, you were just thrown in the hall, told you're stupid. And then you never were able to really access how to make your brain work better to make your life a success. So, I just think of all the people in prison and people that can't find their way in the world, of what an easy access we now have with scientific research and tools like yours, that anybody, I have 4 jobs or 4 careers and 4 businesses. I would like an optimized mind to be able to address my day so that I have more computing power and brain frequency in my mind. And so your tool is really applicable for everybody, not only to learn how their brain works, but to also now bridge the gap to yet another learning of how the vestibular and the balance into the cerebellum is really a missing link. So I think it's really, really profound.
Well, you touched on a lot of things there. First of all, I just want to touch on the whole concept of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Research in America showing that if you give children the belief that they can grow, then they will. They'll grow in their ability, they'll learn, they'll actually get more intelligent. If you don't give them the confidence that they're capable of learning, they are fixed. And there's some amazing research. The results were stunning, undeniable. The problem with giving labels to children is that it gives them a fixed mindset. It's like giving them a tattoo on their forehead saying, you're never going to make much of your life. Yeah. So they stop expecting, teachers stop expecting, parents stop expecting, and they're written off. Now,
let alone the gravity is always going to pull you down. The weeds are always going to grow. The negative mind bias on top of that as a child of self-defeat. It's like, it's over from there for many people.
So the thing I hate about the whole process of diagnosis is that there's always a rush to get a diagnosis. And some parents will tell you, and I really sympathize with them, without a diagnosis, we get no help at all. So I get that. But the education system should be brighter than that. It should say, before we diagnose, we're going to dig deep to find out if there's potential for further development. If we don't do it now, we never will. It's like, let's cast this whole problem in concrete. Let's make a list of every issue. Let's focus on it and let's write it up as a diagnosis.
Right.
That's dreadful. It should be, no, the child is struggling. Let's look for the root cause. And if someone has got a reading issue, if they can't concentrate, if they're not very organized, if they're not forgetful, if they sometimes lose emotional control, boy, that's enough symptoms for me. That's the cerebellum.
Yep.
It explains every one of them clearly. But we haven't got that thought process in the education system yet. And I'm going to shout and scream and holler until I get them to change it. Because until that happens, children are going to be written off that have got huge potential.
Yeah, 1 in 10, you said. I mean, that's a pretty remarkable number for us to be able to have an impact, on kids' lives. And, I think in the school system, and we can kind of close up how the system works, but it's kind of like health insurance. It's like we go to the doctor so that we can get the label, so that we can get the discount on the drug, right? And so that the mind, I believe the thinking mind always wants to solve a problem and always wants to know. So it'll leap to whatever simple conclusion it can come to. And within the school system, we're given I don't know if it's the 503 plan or the 501 plan. I get my financial services and school systems mixed up, but they get this code and then they get access to a para, which then helps them. But the paras are usually helpers and they're paid, to help the child come along. But again, it doesn't address the core issue of the cerebellum here.
It's not more teaching. If you've got holes in the bucket, it's not a bigger fire hose into the bucket. That doesn't solve it. It needs someone to repair the holes. And the education system just doesn't have that thought process right now. But, I often say to parents, if I told you there was $1 billion between your child's ears, would you go and find it?
Mm-hmm.
Because you look at all the billionaires out there, nearly every one of them dropped out of school.
Yep.
Most of them don't read very easily.
Yep.
Over that 0.001% that becomes a billionaire, you've got the other 99.99% who underachieve in life.
Mm-hmm.
We could change that ratio dramatically, and any parent that cares about their child, they aren't going to let their child down and ignore what you're telling them today. If any parent is listening and has got a child that's struggling, you've got to find where their potential is and do something about it.
For you, listeners of Awaken Beauty Podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. Simply go to www.audibletrial.com/Awaken Beauty Podcast. That's www.audibletrial.com Awaken Beauty Podcast. We're talking about learning, I don't even call it learning disabilities, but we're talking about what society has claimed as these, let's say, dyslexia or ADHD or autism and all these different spectrums. Most often parents are led to go outside of the school and go to some kind of center to get the diagnosis. Can you share a little bit about how Zing, your program, helps a child with dyslexia or ADHD or autism, and how it can really address all of these different quote unquote labels that we have in the learning disability realm?
Let's forget the label for a while. Let's look at what's actually hampering their life. What's the limitations on their life? And it always comes back to underdeveloped skills. So whether the label is autism or ADHD or dyslexia, it's just a different combination of underdeveloped skills. So in every case, I see the root cause of what's holding them back is the cerebellum. I'm not saying that's necessarily the root cause of what caused it in the first place, because I agree with you. There's all sorts of environmental things and so on that we need to be looking at and addressing. But when you've got a problem with a child, it's too late to say what was happening a few years ago that caused this to happen. We've got to work now. So that's why I don't even enter into the arguments about what caused autism and was it the MMR? So that, to me, I've got all sorts of thoughts about that, but what I focus on is, no, let's give our time and our emotions and our resources to what can I do to change the lives of these people? So you start by analyzing what are the skill development areas that are holding them back. And we do that using neurological tests. Mm-hmm. From those neurological tests, we can prescribe the precise exercises, when combined together, will focus on the correct part of the cerebellum and start to develop it and develop it and develop it. And our program has got artificial intelligence in, so every day it's adjusting the program. It's only 10 minutes twice a day, but it's giving that precise stimulation every day for 10 minutes or so. And that stimulation actually lasts for hours, even if though you're only doing the exercise for 10 minutes. And every day it builds up and it builds up and it challenges the brain. And if you keep making the brain fire together, eventually it wires together.
Right.
That's exactly what we're doing. And you can actually, every month we retest, so you can see neurological progress, practical progress. Next month, more neurological progress, more practical progress. And the wonderful thing about developing the cerebellum, Cassandra, is it's not like memory. You know, I had to really work hard to spell Cassandra the proper way. Mm-hmm. But I know if I don't practice that regularly, I'll lose that in 3 months. That's because it's the hippocampus looking after that type of memory. But when you develop the cerebellum, it's a bit like learning to ride a bike. When you've got it, you can actually put your bike in the garden shed for 20 years and pull it out. That wiring is still there. So the thrilling thing about developing the cerebellum is it creates lasting change. Yeah. It isn't something you'll carry on doing.
Yeah, I like that. It's the neuroplasticity piece that you're talking about, and it's all the rage right now. But really, how do we improve the brain and keep that gray matter growing and the synapses growing in the right direction and breaking through those glass ceilings? And so what your program is doing is really not just helping them read better or what have you. They're actually rewiring their brain. They're creating neuroplasticity for change that's lasting and always there. And then your body and your mind comes more in sync with being an autopilot to do what it needs to do so that you can free up the hardwire to be able to reboot systems that can elevate your life and your quality of life and your skill sets and all of the above. So it's lasting change. That's huge.
It is huge. And I'd encourage any mum that's listening or dad or grandparent, you may have got to the point where you think, oh, this doesn't apply to my child. Believe me, the chances are it does. I've worked closely with 45,000 or more children and collected all the research data on them. It is incredibly rare to find a problem with learning and behavior that isn't positively impacted by developing the cerebellum. Mm-hmm. It's extremely rare. You know, there are some instances of global developmental delay where it's harder to get progress. But in the vast majority of children with classic learning issues, which are sometimes diagnosed ADHD or dyslexia or dyspraxia, or even various forms of ASD and Asperger's and so on, those are classic collections of underdeveloped skills. So the stimulation of the cerebellum normally makes a really wonderful, lasting change. So any parent out there that's thinking, does this really apply to my child? Go and check. Go to you've got it in Minneapolis there. You've got the Revolution Wellness. They're one of the first in America to have that equipment put in. That's how forward-thinking they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go and have the test done. Go and see for yourself. I won't need to say anything else. In fact, Cassandra won't need to say anything else because you'll see for yourself exactly what the issue is. And I've seen parents cry when they see the results of that test because it's such a relief. Oh, you're not stupid. You're not lazy. You're not thick.
You don't not want to learn. You don't, it's not defiant. Kids want to learn. They love to learn. They love the imagination in the brain. They love to develop skill sets. It's just when they can't figure out for themselves how to break through that quote unquote glass ceiling and why they can't be like everybody else, quote unquote, it's just a frustration war all in all. But, with your system and what I love about it is that technology, we can take this in two ways. We can say technology is overwhelming the children today and it's all for naught. But here's the deal. We're always going to have our cell phones and hopefully you have an EMF breaker on there. So you're protecting yourself from EMF. I'm a bit of a biohacker as well, but we can gamify experiences now for our own development and to build neuroplasticity in the brain is pretty dang awesome. And so the process is, and for everybody that's local here in Minnesota, Susie Youngquist and Lisa over at Revolution Health has an impeccable health and wellness center for mothers and children. And they just have the biggest heart, an incredible team at every level. And so they have brought Zing in. And so anybody in Minnesota, you have the opportunity, and Wynford and the team over at Rev is offering a free book in which he has also on Amazon. If those of you are not local in Minnesota, absolutely Stop Struggling in School by Wynford Dore. Now, it's a super awesome price. So you can get it really quick and really fast. And, Wynford and I, before we started today's episode, that is the just reading that book for anybody and everybody so that we can alleviate the pressure and really truly understand how the brain works, why this is an imperative piece and how anybody can benefit is step one, read the book. Number two, if you're local, you can walk into the center and you get a free assessment. And I believe it's regularly $99. And so they're going to do an eye tracking assessment, sit down with you and really personalize your child's experience, what to expect. And as Wynford said, it's only 2 sessions at 10 minutes a day. Now, I do biofeedback and I do a whole analysis on EEG and brain and infection and all these other things. And people can play chimes on their phone and or their own personalized wellness tones to help the frequency of the brain, the mind, the body, and the soul get back into coherence. It's kind of like a biofeedback program for the brain because the child is consistently bringing the brain into coherence with the vestibular and the cerebellum and starting to rewire that. And once you start wiring that back together, it can't be undone. And so the guarantee here really is a guarantee. You're going to see results no matter what, I believe, no matter what level you're at. I'm sitting here raising my hand saying, when can I get my assessment? Because I would love to optimize my brain. But can you maybe just give us, an example of maybe an athlete or a CEO or a child that comes to mind right now and the results that they've had on the Zing program?
Oh, I can give you loads. There's a wonderful athlete that was a Canadian athlete over here called Jordan Petrus, and he'd had a good ice hockey career. He was captain of the team over here in Europe, and he asked me whether he could just see what would happen. Well, for the next 2 seasons until he retired, so he was coming up to retirement age, he had the best statistics of his life. So he's since then he's persuaded a very famous American ice hockey player who's also is captain of his team, and he's just had the best season ever. And we're just waiting for him to give us permission to use his name as well. So Jordan Petrus is now in Denver. He's heading up an academy there. An amazing guy. We had somebody who became world champion in a sport you wouldn't know there. It's played in Canada. It's called snooker. And he became world champion at the age of 38. He gives us all of the credit. So we can prove that even at the highest level, the increased precision in skills can make a very significant difference. So that's at the athlete end. The story I heard this week was actually from Minneapolis, from somebody that had gone to Dr. Susie Youngquist's center. And the story came back that this little lad, he was used to getting no marks for his tests because he couldn't get anything right. And this week he got a score of 11. And that was just 4 weeks after the program had started for him. Now it's typically a 6-month, maybe a 9-month program for him. So within 4 weeks, his eye tracking, his auditory processing was kicking in. You imagine what happened to his self-esteem. You imagine how thrilled his parents are.
Yep.
So what is strange about this is I've been doing this for 20 years, Cassandra. Every single one feels like the first. It is so thrilling because every child's self-esteem, every child's learning is so critical. So I have these thrills every day from all around the world. And sometimes people come back to me after 15 years and then, do you remember my son? He couldn't read and this and that. Oh, he's just gone to Oxford University. And he's got a degree the same as the former prime minister. And so these stories happen all the time, but I never get used to them. I just want all of your listeners soon to be sending these stories through because it's thrilling for them. And believe me, it's thrilling for me as well.
Yeah. I love your heart, Wynford, and I love what you've done and what you've created. And, it almost brings me to tears because the confidence as a child and the joy and the happiness as children that we're supposed to experience and the overwhelm. I mean, we have like 20 billion bits of information coming at our mind at all times, So put that on top of an overwhelmed brain and someone that can't really process either quickly or efficiently. It's just an everyday battle. And it's the reason why we have so much depression. It's the reason why we have so many issues. And if we can just go back to basics and go back to understanding the mind and really up-leveling the mind, it's just really a key.
All right, ladies, if you're looking for natural, organic, solution-based beauty and superior CBD, go to evokebeauty.com. That's evoqbeauty.com and receive 25% off your very first order with the code AWAKEN. Again, that's evoqbeauty.com. Type in the code AWAKEN for 25% off your first order.
Piece. And I have one other question for you, and it's just more out of curiosity on my end. Are you familiar with Kathy Kolbe at all?
My partner has read one of her books. Would that be right?
Okay.
But that's the closest I've got.
Sure. So Kathy Kolbe, her father and her developed the Kolbe analysis. And so she has it.
Oh, yes. Phoenix, Arizona.
Yes.
Yes, I've done the test.
Okay. Yeah. Do you remember your score?
No, but it was off the scale in two different directions on different scores.
I'm pretty sure you were probably a quick start, a high quick start.
Yeah.
So I am also a 9 quick start and 4. So it's quick start, implementer, fact finder, and follow through. And so if you I'm just kind of thinking, in this context of, there's one part where like the DISC analysis and all these personality tests, they're very cognitive based. Mm-hmm. And so when I tap into what you're talking about, and I tap into also what Kathy Kolbe has done, and she goes into the schools and helps teachers understand how to teach to the child and catch them early on with ADHD, is that it's cognitive testing. And so what you're talking about is taking the cognitive skills, which is the instincts. So I have an instinct of a quick start and everything else is a 4. So if I'm having to run in my batteries of follow through and implementer, and I'm always wanting to be in quick start, my whole system slows down. So I'm kind of going back to what you've developed with Zing, is you're helping the cognitive skills, the instincts, the beautiful gifts of a child, but then also putting it into kind of a reboot system to help make sure that you're optimizing that. And it's not wrong, right, or indifferent to be different levels on the cognitive scale. But I just want to say that, what you're talking about with neuroplasticity and cognitive skills are different than like a DISC analysis and cognitive that are always changing. And so we're really getting down to the root and really understanding both who you are as an individual and then up-leveling the system at a core level.
My hunch is, I've never proven this, is that some elements of the Kolbe score we would change. The reason why you and I are not brilliant completer finishers is because we've got a fire hose of ideas going into our thinking brain all the time.
Exactly.
So before we finish processing one, there's another 10 to deal with. Well, what we do is we increase working memory capacity, which is quite cool. So by increasing it, you've got a bigger platform on which to work. You've got space for more subjects, more mental fragments there scattered about, and they're there all available to use. So I am more organized. We become organized when we've got working memory capacity to put things. It's like the more pigeonholes you have up here, the tidier your desk is. So we see that change in organization in children. We don't talk about it very much because the top of the pyramid usually is their ADHD or their ability. But further down that pyramid, that hierarchy of needs, will be things like organization. Well, improving working memory capacity is one of them. We also improve decision-making speed. One of the big issues today is making poor short-term decisions. Well, the more working memory capacity you've got, the more you take into account, therefore the bigger, the better the quality of your decision-making process. So we improve decision-making speed by 25% on average, which means you can get 25% more done in a day with no more effort, or you can get just as much done in the day with a lot less effort. So it reduces stress. So these are all some of the side effects. And one thing I haven't mentioned yet is The plasticity of the brain stays right into old age. Sheffield University came to me a while ago and said, well, we want to do some work with Zing and old people. And I said, oh, look, I'm really focused on children. I don't know if it'll work for old people that much. And they said, well, let's try. So they did, and they came back and they've had it published and peer-reviewed. And it showed that all these old people got better memory, more confidence, better balance. So we were recovering all the skills that were in decline in old people up to the age of 90. That's kind of thrilling. That's a group of people I really want to get to. And of course, I'm getting closer there myself. So I've got to do it for myself at some point.
Okay. So on that note, I have to say, you look incredible for your age. I'm putting you in speaker view right now. Can you tell the audience how old you are?
Well, I'm over 70.
Can you believe that? I mean, he looks like he's 45. So what you're doing is certainly working for you.
Well, you keep the brain young, Cassandra,
yep.
And everything stays happening. So
true.
Look, I've got more work to do than I've done already. So I think the universe is just blessing me with staying young and fit, and I hope it stays that way. I want to finish the job. You're helping me. Lisa's helping me. Dr. Susie's helping me. I would love it if all of your listeners help too by spreading this word. There's a lot of families that have no hope. Mm-hmm. Give them hope, legitimate hope, not false hope, legitimate hope, because the science is there to solve so many of the things that cause these children to be tragically misunderstood. Often the children with the biggest brains have the biggest challenges. So the most potential and the least recognition. Imagine how lonely, misunderstood those children feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I cannot thank you enough for being on the Awaken Beauty podcast today. And it's a near and dear topic to my heart and to all the moms in my chair, and give credit to Suze and Lisa and everything that they're doing at Rev Health. And so, I always end the show and then we'll find out where we can find you is a question for you and something that you personally on the Awaken Beauty podcast, something that you have personally been awakened to lately in your life. What would that be?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and it's a very personal one.
Mm-hmm.
I've been studying the effects of the amygdala on post-traumatic stress disorder. It worries me that such a lot of people have been abused in one shape or form, sometimes sexually abused or emotionally abused as children. Sometimes they've been to war. So the number of folks struggling with what I call amygdala memory issues, PTSD type issues, is huge. So I want to find a way of getting practical solutions, effective solutions, natural solutions to a lot more people. So I'm looking at things like EMDR. I'm looking at acupuncture, and there's certain types of acupuncture and certain types of EMDR. I'm looking to bring some of these natural things, and hypnotherapy too. I'm trying to bring it together. And I'd like to think within a few years' time, I can lead another march of tools, practical tools that can reach a lot more people. So that's where my research head is right now, is people are suffering that shouldn't be suffering, and they are. And you're part of, and your organization that I know cares very, very much about helping that sort of. So my heart is there. It's a long way away from brain development, but it's a new challenge for me. Hopefully I'll stay young enough to get that job finished.
You certainly will. You certainly have gone from success to significance at 70 plus in your life, and you have much further to go, and you will. And to your point about, your awakening, I really appreciate you sharing that. Is, what you're saying is really true. And I don't think it'll take as much work as you think and much development, because I think there's two parts to this, is especially when we become adults and why our thinking is so slow and our brain frequency is so low vibrationally and our health is so low vibrationally, is that, our hardwired system is so captivated from big T's and little T's, big traumas, little traumas, to what you're talking about, PTSD. And when people think about PTSD, they do think war, they think rape or, something like that. But all of these little rocks put into our life that we experience creates like low-level PTSD. And then the brain isn't able to compute very well to what you're talking about. And so you have to clean out, quote unquote, the basement. So one, you can have a fresh subconscious mind that's not slowing you down while you're working with the cerebellum and the vestibular system and addressing the trauma in life. So I think you're right on course. And I think now it's just putting these two pieces together that you can increase the efficiency of the brain and the neuroplasticity, but also making sure that you're tending to the needs of the subconscious mind and the emotional health that comes from that. So I think you're right in step, and you'll do great in that arena.
Well, what we see is that we increase cognitive capacity, mental capacity, and therefore we're increasing mental strength.
Yep.
And that's
resilience. And resilience to stress.
And exactly, resilience. So wasn't aware that Revolution were offering that very low cost deal. Yep. That really is just a wonderful offer from them, and I take my hat off to them, because that will give so much comfort to parents. They should grab that opportunity, get into Revolution as fast as they can, and start their child on an exciting journey of hope.
Absolutely. So I'm going to leave you guys with this, and thank you so much, Wynford, for being on the Awaken Beauty Show. So specifically, everybody in Minnesota, you know where to go. You can find Revolution Wellness in Plymouth, Minnesota, and they're currently offering an exclusive Zing special. So what you're going to get is a 79 eye tracking assessment, which is regularly $99, and then a copy of the Stop Struggling in School by Wynford. You get that book for free. So you want to go in, make sure that you get the assessment, set up an assessment with them, and they're open on Wednesdays and Thursdays for scheduling. And you can contact Revolution's Director of Zing Performance, and her name, lovely, love her so much, Lisa Carlson, and she can be found at 763-285-8690, or you can email her at lisa@revolution-chiropractic.com. Basically, what Zing is, everybody that's listening, is it gives you the ability to develop fundamental skills. Whether you feel overwhelmed, anxious, unfocused, or lack of performance, you need individual physical exercises to stimulate what Wynford was talking about, your cerebellum, the brain's brain. So this is a breakthrough in personal development and mental health, and what you've also reviewed in today's show. And they focus on the root cause. So it's giving you the ability to branch out and develop every level of your potential and break through these glass ceilings. Now, it could be as a child, a CEO, or an athlete, whatever, whoever, an elderly person. We all need to increase our brain and cognitivity. So it's basically personalized 2 times a day, 10 minutes, and you basically gamified your success. And so it's pretty awesome to have this new technology and be able to really integrate it in our day effortlessly and easily. So Wynford, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Congratulations to you and all of your successes. And I know you have so much more ahead of you. So hopefully
thanks to you,
and
thanks to you, Cassandra, for sharing this wonderful message.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for joining the Awaken Beauty Podcast. Until next time, stay sane, get sleep, and I always say, bring your sexy back.
All right, ladies, if you're looking for natural, organic, solution-based beauty and superior CBD, go to evokebeauty.com. That's evoqbeauty.com, and receive 25% off your very first order with the code AWAKEN. Again, that's evoqbeauty.com. Type in the code AWAKEN for 25% off your first order.
Well, hello, Awaken Beauty. Thank you so much for joining the show today. Were you inspired? Please leave a comment or your own personal aha moment so others can capture exactly what you did. Also, please like and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And if you're interested in high quality natural products for your hair, skin, and wellness, including organic CBD, please visit evokebeauty.com. Again, that is evokebeauty.com.
evoqbeauty.com. And until next time, darling, stay sane, get sleep, and bring your sexy back.